Coming up today on this episode of Seahawks Forever, powered by BetUS, you know it's officially the offseason for us here in Seahawks land when it's mock draft season. And today I'm going to kick that off with not one, but two mock drafts for you, 3-rounders. One that I've already prepared ahead of time based on what I think most of you want the Seahawks to do at the moment. The other one I'm going to do live in real time, taking best player available. See how the board falls, and then afterwards you vote on which one you think is best. I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. Mock drafts coming up next.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Discover BetUS's Casino Playground. If you're a slots enthusiast, BetUS has got the games to raise your pulse. Test your skills with timeless classics, explore the newest, hottest slots, and feel that casino buzz with BetUS live dealer tables. Sign up now and get a 200% sign-up bonus up to $5,000 using the URL betus.com/casinos. Welcome back, everybody. How does it feel? How does it feel to know that it's the offseason? To be watching and listening as other teams in the league prepare to continue playing, including a team in your own division. The Ryan Grubb news yesterday, certainly if you didn't catch my reaction to that, do so. I'll link that down below. Also, the wrap-up show following the Rams game on Sunday that I did on Bryce and Ryan's channel on the Hawkzone Rundown podcast. That is available as well. Otherwise, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hit the thumbs up if you like this video. Hit that bell for notification of future episodes. If you listen on audio, be sure you're subscribed. That way you will always know when there is an episode coming up. And if you haven't watched or viewed me or listened to me prior to this season, then you may not know that I am as excited for off-season content as I am in season. I am a draft addict and just love the whole team building aspect of football and sports and what happens outside the lines and up in those offices in VMAC to put together the team for next year. And a big part of that is the draft. And I like the draft so much that one channel isn't enough to contain it all. So starting on Saturday, Bryce Coots of the Hawkzone Rundown and I are going to form a joint venture. It's called the Pick Is In podcast. You can find it now. Here, let me get the graphic up on the screen. Our Twitter account, the Pick Is In Pod. Also, if you search for the Pick Is In Pod, all one word on YouTube, you'll find the channel. Go ahead and subscribe there so you know when there's new content. And we're going to start off with a full NFL first round mock draft for every team. This channel will be not Seahawk focused. It'll be on the entire league. We'll do positional breakdowns, player profiles. We'll look at each division, other teams around the league. So if you're into the draft and you just can't get enough of it, subscribe to that channel. But do not fret, because I will still do just as much, if not more, Seahawk content as far as the draft is concerned right here on Seahawks Forever. And speaking of the draft, one more time before I get into this mock today, or these two mocks, is I will be heading to the Senior Bowl in Mobile on the 26th and covering that entire week, all the practices, media availabilities, the game, of course, bringing you all of the draft content that I can possibly muster. And a big shout out and thanks to those of you who supported the trip and allowed it to happen. Can't wait to get down there and bring back all that content for you. All right, so here's what I did. These are only going to be 3-rounders simply because at this point in the process, I'm just not intimately familiar with the draft class going that deep. And even at the top of the draft, you know, I've started to skim the surface, but that knowledge and insight will get deeper and more clear as we move through the process. Certainly when I get back from Mobile, it will. My goal until then is to familiarize myself with all of the players who are going to Mobile. And in doing so, Bryce and I have started creating a consensus big board using all of, I think we have 5 or 6 different lists from some of the top analysts out there that we're compiling and to try and work off of that. It's up to about 97 names already, so we'll have our top 100 out soon as we start to start to work in some of our own thoughts and observations on this class, which is generally considered to be weak overall compared to other years, and especially weak at a number of positions, including, unfortunately, quarterback, at least at the top of the draft. Also, this draft is being tagged as one that lacks blue chip players, where in normal years you might have most teams typically end up with somewhere between 15 and 18 first-round draft picks, just kind of as a general rule. We've heard John Schneider talk about those numbers in the past. This year, some teams and some analysts are saying there might be 10 or less. When Rob Staten came on the show a month ago, he had his first full horizontally built board, and he only had 9 true first-round grades. And by true first-round grades, I mean someone graded that would be a first-rounder in any other year, not based on a curve, but in any other year, there may be 10 or less, which is going to impact how teams approach this draft, right? If you're one who wants the Seahawks to really aggressively try to trade up and get one of those 2 quarterbacks, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, who are considered at the top of this draft, you're not going to find a trade partner because the value isn't there for them to trade down, especially a big trade down like it would require for the Seahawks. They'd have to mortgage the farm to get up there that high. Those 2 guys may go 1 and 2. But even in smaller moves, if you are one who wants the Seahawks to be able to move back from 18 and pick up some extra draft capital because maybe you want them to target interior offensive line early in the draft, and usually those guys don't go that high. So maybe you slide back a few picks, pick up additional draft resources. This might not be the best year for that either, because teams may just not be willing to move up to 18, knowing they're going to get a guy that doesn't have a first-round grade. Now, maybe you get lucky. Sometimes a team will have a player graded as a first-round player at 18 when other teams don't. Good example of that, when the Seahawks drafted Derek Hall 2 years ago in the second round out of Alabama, they said after the draft they had a first-round grade on Hall. Now, not everyone did. He obviously didn't go in the first round. And so that's where the Seahawks kind of, they have a different way of doing things and viewing prospects, and they grade, as John says, for his roster. And so, that's a good example. There always is that possibility. There's also the possibility that in that range, some of the quarterbacks that have second-round grades may get artificially pushed up the board because of positional value. And a team that missed out on Sanders or Ward might want to get aggressive to move up into the first round again to get one of those guys that are sliding, even if they don't have a first-round grade on him, because they need a quarterback that bad and they don't want to risk losing him. There are a couple of teams that would fit that mold, right? If, let's say, Shedeur and Cam Ward go 1 and 2, or even 1 and 3, with the Giants sitting there at 3, if Cleveland decides not to go quarterback. And let's say, take your pick. Let's say Jalen Milroe is the 3rd quarterback on the board. Well, the Raiders screwed themselves by winning 2 of their last 3. The Giants screwed themselves by winning in week 17, no thanks to Drew Lock. And so those teams, desperate for a quarterback, took themselves out of play for Sanders and Ward. And they, again, unlikely to be able to move up to get them because those teams aren't going to want to give up those spots. So maybe they force it and want to move up to 18, for example, to get a Milroe, a Jackson Dart, a Will Howard, what have you. Well, in that case, then wouldn't the Seahawks just stick at 18 and take a quarterback so that they have their young guy for the future? Just a lot to think about. So as we entered into this exercise, I wanted to look at it a couple of different ways, because this is how I approach mock drafts. I will do it at times based on what I want the Seahawks to do. I will at times do it based on what I think they might do, relative to their history and some of their patterns. But also I'll just try to think outside the box. What if? Because we don't know. There's a lot we don't know. Between now and draft, free agency happens first. And so, y'all are out there saying fix the offensive line, draft offensive linemen no matter what. But a lot could happen between now and the end of April. The Seahawks could go out and make a splash in free agency, sign an offensive lineman or 2 in free agency. And I know I know what John Schneider has said about interior offensive linemen getting overdrafted and overpaid at times. I know what he said before the game on Sunday, that they typically, quote, aren't big players in free agency. I'm not saying they have to go out and get Trey Smith. But there are going to be veterans available on the free agent market that might not have big splashy names like you want, but that are just very good, solid offensive linemen that would help this young team, because they're not just going to flush all those young guys they've drafted the last couple of years out the door, right? We got a lot of valuable reps for Oluwatimi and Lamea. You know, they've still got Anthony Bradford, Christian Haynes. Are they going to find a fit for him? So they're not just going to start over. Some of those guys are going to figure in. Really, really great news from Abe Lucas yesterday as he gave an end-of-the-year interview, a lengthy interview, and he talked openly for the first time about the injury. He said it was a tendon injury, so likely patella tendon, which was speculated from a lot of people based on the timeline recovery. And he said 12 months after surgery is when he was told he'd be fully healed, and that happens a week from now. So what we saw from Abe Lucas the second half of the season was when he was able to get back out there, still wearing a knee brace, but I never noticed him limping or favoring the leg. I noticed a lack of conditioning, but that seemed to get better as the year went along. I noticed a lack of strength early on, but that seemed to improve. I felt like by the end of the year, plus given his ability to recover from each of these games and get out there and play until the abdomen injury cropped up in week 18, that he was a lot closer to what we saw from him as a rookie than he was at the end of the year than he was when he first came back and played against the 49ers. So very, very hopeful based on what he said, that he's feeling good, no complications, hasn't had any setbacks. He made it through the second half of the season. Now he gets to go into the offseason and have a fully healthy rehab and conditioning period getting ready for next year. That's promising. We saw a lot of good stuff out of Satawa Lamea. We saw some really solid play from Oluwatimi. And there's other guys on that roster, other young guys. Jalen Sundell, I like. I like his athletic ability. There's the possibility that Haynes could play center. He's worked out there before, and the Seahawks were trying him there the last couple of weeks. So don't give up on that group as a whole. And so the Seahawks may address that significantly before the draft even happens. But I know it's what you want. And so what I did is I went into a mock draft simulator and I did a 3-round mock. And here's what I came up with. This is the one based on what I think most of you want them to do. Then we're going to do one in real time and see how that works out. So here's what I came up with. Had to go offensive line early. And when I was picking, there were a number of guys on the board, a couple of big tackles. Ursary from Minnesota was still there. Josh Connerly of Oregon was there. And while those guys could project to guard, and I think that would be a really smart pick if the Seahawks had an opportunity to take a tackle in the first round that could play guard, then you're hedging yourself at both. Unfortunately, the two best candidates to do that, Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell, Banks from Texas, Campbell from LSU, probably gone. Campbell might get closer to 18 than Banks because some teams are going to strictly see him as a guard because there's some arm length issues there. He's just so good just as a player. I don't see him getting to 18. If he did, I would have taken Will Campbell here, just so you know. But Booker's a guy that's starting to get some buzz among Seahawk fans. Rob Staten's been talking about him for months. I've fallen in love with the guy, and for a couple of reasons. While you can get a really good guard prospect in the second or third round, and that's probably what we'll end up looking to do in our real-time draft, I think Booker stands out above them, specifically for how they want to play. 6'5", 335. He was a big-time recruit, 3-year starter, started as a true freshman at Alabama. He plays how you would expect a guy that size to play. He absolutely can dominate physically in the run game. He's a mauler. He finishes. But he also is an outstanding pass protector to the point that he has, let me find it here, did not allow a single sack this season in Alabama and only has allowed 2 in his entire 3-year career at Alabama. He's only allowed 2 sacks to go along with 7 quarterback hits and 21 hurries over 3 seasons from a guy that's built and has a play style like you wouldn't You would expect to see him after first glance and dig deeper into his film and see some issues in pass protection with lateral agility, athletic ability. That is not the case. Plus, he's so young. Today, as we sit here, he's only 20 years old. He'll be 21 on draft day. He turns 21 a couple of weeks before the draft. So you're talking about a guy who has played at a high level in a major program in big games week after week after week, and is still also has a lot of projectability left at just 20 years old. I think that would be a home run first-round draft pick for the Seahawks that fans just would have a hard time picking any holes in. Then in the second round, this is where I'm going to start to dip into that second tier of quarterbacks. It includes Dart and Will Howard and Jalen Milroe. And then there's some other guys, Quinn Ewers, if he comes out. We don't know about that yet. He reportedly has $6 to $7 million NIL offers to stay in school. And some other guys throughout the process will emerge. I know a lot of you like Dylan Gabriel. I just don't like his size. I don't think he has the arm strength to overcome it. I think he's a backup. But Jackson Dart is a guy that I like a lot. Ever since really I saw him play as a true freshman when he had to come in against the Cougs in Pullman when the starter got hurt and tore us up. 65% completion rate in his college career, transferred to Ole Miss after his first season at USC, has started for 3 years there for Lane Kiffin. 12,000 yards and 81 to 27 touchdown to interception ratio. And what I like about his game is the improvement that we saw at Ole Miss under Kiffin. His first season, he threw 11 picks, 20 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. Second season, 23 to 5. Third season, 29 to 6. Takes care of the football. You see tight window throws, though. He's not afraid. At times, he looks like a gunslinger. He's not afraid to be aggressive. He's a winner, too. A 21 and 5 record the last two seasons at Ole Miss playing in the SEC. And he can also beat you with his legs, rushing for an average over the last 3 years at Ole Miss of 500 yards and 5 touchdowns a season to go along with how he throws the football. If you saw his throw in the Peach Bowl the other day, which Bryce referred to as the Zach Wilson Pro Day throw, but in a game where he's rolling to his left and throws about a 35-yard strike, rolling to his left, but throwing to the flag, the front pylon in the end zone for a touchdown, was absolutely outstanding. Really like him as a competitor, like him as a quarterback. I think you can work with him. And I do think there's a really good chance that after the process, if he really hits a home run throughout the entire process, that he's a guy that someone's going to want to take in the first round because they don't want to risk missing out on him. And he could actually end up being in play for discussion at the 18th pick. And then in the third round, I'm really looking for some impact on defense. And it kind of hurt, honestly, to wait until the third round to do this. I think the Seahawks need to continue to add to their defensive line and edge group. I think cornerback might be a significant need, and this is a good quarterback class. So it actually would surprise me to come out of the top 3 rounds without a corner, to be honest. I haven't dug into the class very deeply yet, though, so I'm not as familiar with them. But they do need some help on the defensive line, and I want them to keep building that moving forward. I'd like to find another guy on the interior that can penetrate and help get to the passer, take some of that pressure off Byron Murphy. Omar Norman Lott, defensive tackle from Tennessee, is a transfer, played his first 2 years at Arizona State, 6'3", 315 pounds, still another young guy. He'll be 22 on draft day. And in his 2 seasons in Tennessee, 10 sacks, 15 quarterback hits, 24 hurries. Here's a little bit from his scouting report as the guys at NFL Draft Buzz described him. The tape shows a versatile interior defender with the mass to 2 gap and the quickness to penetrate. His anchor strength and stack and shed ability translate across multiple fronts, while his initial burst allows him to shoot gaps when aligned in passing situations. The lateral agility and motor are NFL caliber traits that will serve him well in a rotational role early in his career. He's scheme versatile, able to play the 0, 1, or 3 technique, depending on down and distance, adds value for NFL defensive coordinators. And that sounds exactly like the kind of player that Mike Macdonald likes on his defense as well, a guy that can move around and be versatile in that sense, and also with that type of reported motor. That's going to get you noticed by a lot of NFL teams, but certainly something that Mike Macdonald is going to look for. Next up, we'll do it real time. We'll do it by best player available, open-minded to all options. That's coming up next. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. It's the new year, a time most of us take stock of our lives. Are we where we want to be? Are we who we want to be? Personal development is a process that ends no matter how well you think you're doing emotionally, socially, financially. What are your goals for 2025? How can you become the best version of you that you could be? How about talking with a licensed professional? If you've ever considered starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this January with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/forever today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/forever for 10% off your first month. And guys, I know you've heard it from me before, but I just cannot stop wearing my Doer apparel. The best apparel company you've never heard of. I made that slogan up. Their slogan is built for doing, and they certainly are. They specialize in lifestyle apparel for any occasion, featuring antibacterial and sustainable materials. My favorites are their stretch performance jeans. These things are flexible, light, comfortable, all while being built to last. I've also got a couple of their moleskin shirts. They are stylish, they are comfortable, they are versatile. You're going to love them. Trust me, I know you're going to love your Doers as much as I do. Check out Doer's flagship stores in LA or Denver, or shop online at shopdoer.com/forever. Right now, my listeners get 20% off your first purchase when you use this exclusive URL, shopdoer.com/forever. This is such a great deal. Take advantage of it while you can. Do not wait. To get 20% off your first order, go now to shopdoer.com/forever. All right, so I've got the board up on the screen. There's a number of good simulators out there, but for the purposes of this one, I'm using the PFF.com mock draft simulator for a couple of reasons. One is I think their grades tend to be a little bit more realistic at this point in the process. They don't forget guys. Some of the other sims, there are guys way down the list, down in the top 100, 150 that belong in the first and second round. I think PFF does a little bit better job throughout the entire college football season of staying abreast of those guys because they're constantly grading them so they don't get lost in the mix. So I think that's part of it. But also just their interface and how it might look to you if you're watching on the YouTube channel, I think it's a little cleaner and looks a little bit better. So what I did is I set it up for a 3-round draft, and we're just going to go ahead and start it. And then we'll look at the board and I'll walk through it in my thought process, and you'll see in real time what I'm thinking as we do this. So let's go ahead and start. I'm not going to do any trades, right? So let's see who was taken so far. And this is why I like PFF. Again, their grades, I think especially at the top of the draft, are much more realistic. This looks very reasonable. And a lot like some of the mock drafts that you're seeing out there now from some of the best in the business. Shedeur Sanders going 1 to Tennessee, although there's reports they might like Cam Ward better. They've got Ward going 2nd. So, at least as it relates to the Seahawks, you know that those guys aren't going to be available. Travis Hunter going 3 to the Giants. How much, not to go off on any long tangents here, this is discussion that will best be had over on the other channel. But can you imagine? I talked about this on Twitter this morning. If the Giants, because Drew Lock had the game of his life 2 weeks ago and won and took them out of the running for the number 1 pick, they end up retaining Brian Daboll in part because they think they have a shot at a franchise quarterback and they want him to be the guy to develop him, and they miss out on Sanders and Ward and sit at 3. Like, Travis Hunter's a nice consolation prize, but my goodness, there's not another guy that you can push up to 3 from this quarterback class. That's a little crazy. You could maybe circle back around. Maybe they're a team that would be interested in being aggressive because they have to. And if the Seahawks don't want to take a quarterback at 18, or they don't like the guy the Giants are trading up for, because you'd have to know that, then maybe they could be in play. But that's interesting. Mason Graham, 4th. Then you go Millen. There's Will Campbell at 6 going. They've got him going before Banks. I would flip-flop those guys. I think Banks has a better shot at going 6th and Campbell 11th, like they have Banks going to the Niners. I think that's pretty solid and really leaves a group of players that I think is pretty realistic for the Seahawks. So if you look at their best available, Nick Scorton, edge, Texas A&M, really tempting right off the bat. That's a guy that might not be available. You can see that they've got him actually ranked 10th, but he's still there. But we're talking about a guy, look at his dimensions, Texas A&M, 6'4", 285, a guy that can move all around the defensive line, something that could really fit what the Seahawks need. Talked about that a little bit with their 3rd-round pick on the last mock. And then you get a bunch of offensive tackles here. Ariante Ursary from Minnesota is a big dude, 330 pounds, 6'6". Can he play guard? Not sure yet. Not as familiar with him. Wyatt Millam is a guy that's really intriguing because of his pass protection ability. You can see his numbers there. Hasn't given up a single sack in his career at West Virginia. 1 quarterback hit and 30 hurries in his career. That's pretty incredible. And there are some scouting reports I've seen that he could play guard, but also be a guy that could project at tackle too. If you, I don't know, choose not to re-sign Charles Cross after his 5th year, or if Abe Lucas has a setback, would kind of hedge your needs there. Kenneth Grant is a guy that a lot of you have pitched to me. He's that true nose tackle that the Seahawks are lacking and really need to help free up Byron Murphy, be able to move him to 3 technique and be a little more versatile with him. 6'3", 339, not a guy that puts up a lot of flashy stats, but he's going to clog some lanes. Shamar Stewart, similar to Nick Scorton, another guy, 6'6", 290, raw, has some development to do. This is an interesting board, and then I'm surprised to see some guys a little lower on their board. And here's an example, and I may go this way just to be different than the first one and prove a point. I could easily take Wyatt Millam here, and probably would, to be honest with you, depending, of course, on what they did in free agency, because of that pass protection ability and what a need that is for the Seahawks, but also his versatility, the ability to play guard or tackle. I would probably go with Millam here. But Tyler Warren, when the draft comes around, he's not going to be sitting there at 18. He's not going to be there at 26 either. There's a chance he'll be there at 18, but he sure as hell isn't going to be there at 26, which they have him rated. And that's low. I think by the time this draft process is done, you're going to see Tyler Warren. I've seen George Kittle comps. This is a guy that has a chance to be an elite tight end in the league. I've seen some scouting analysts say that their grade is very similar to Brock Bowers and what they had for him last year. 6'6", 261, outstanding, dynamic in the pass game, but also a willing and capable physical player and blocking in the run game. He's a guy I'd be really tempted to take, as would Tyleik Williams, another interior defender out of Ohio State, 6'3", 327. That dude can be a beast. But for purposes of showing you something different and how that might work, I'm going to go with Tyler Warren here. I want you all, as much as you can, to do 2 things for me. All right? We're going to talk you through this. One is don't overproject and overreact at this point to what the Seahawks' needs are today. Because as I said before, the draft is the last thing to happen in the process. I wish it was the other way around. I really do. The players' union would never go for it because they want their veteran players to be taken care of. And if you held the draft before free agency, it would lose some money for some guys. But I just love the idea that, if you could fill those holes, know what you have in your rookie class first, then go out in free agency and be more targeted about needs. You'd be dealing with a little more known qualities, known quantities in both. But because free agency's first, Seahawks might go out and fill their needs. They might make a trade for an offensive lineman, or certainly they could sign 1 or 2 free agents that we all feel good about. So going into the draft, we feel like, hey, best player available is the way to go. Well, Tyler Warren is a dude that can absolutely be a weapon for you in the pass game. And, of course, we don't know who the new offensive coordinator is going to be. Is it a guy that leans on the tight end, likes to use the tight end in the passing game or not? We started to scratch the surface, I think, finally a little bit the last few weeks of what Noah Fant can do. I thought he was the best offensive player for the Seahawks on the field on Sunday. But he's got that cap hit next year of $13.5 million. If they want him back, they're going to have to restructure that. It'd be an easy way to clear up some cap space. But Tyler Warren's a guy you take anyway, even if you're keeping Noah Fant. And if you're one of those who thinks the Seahawks should consider trading DK Metcalf, then hell yes, you want to take a guy like this. Because I don't know if you've noticed already, this wide receiver class is weaker than it's been in the last 4 or 5 years. And it's particularly weak if you're looking for a big outside receiver. Like Ted McMillan's going to go in the top 5. You're not going to get him. There's a lot of slot guys in this draft. A lot of smaller, quicker guys, which, hey, there's a need for that on our roster. But if you're going to look to replace DK in some way, you could do that with a guy like Tyler Warren as opposed to an outside receiver. So that's the way we're going to go. So now we're in the second round. And this is where I start looking hard at the quarterbacks, no matter what draft I'm doing. And so let's do that again here. And we've got a whole bunch of guys available. Milroe, Howard, and they've got Dart ranked kind of low. They've got him down at 210, which is criminal, in my opinion. But there's some others. Kyle McCord is another guy with a ton of experience. Max Brown, who talked about him on the show, is a guy he really liked. Carson Beck is a guy that's really fallen out of favor. I was surprised that he declared for the draft, but a year ago at this time, people thought he would be in the running for the number 1 quarterback. He certainly still has some skill and played at a high level. Is he a guy that, as he drops down the board, starts to gain more value? I know a bunch of you like Gabriel as well. Just, again, to be different, I'm going to go Will Howard here because PFF has him ranked higher. And because honestly, right now, and Bryce texted me this morning and said, who do you like right now more, Dart or Howard? I said, today as I sit here, it's Dart. But Howard's a guy that gets better every week. And he could change my mind, and I think a lot of others, if he continues to play at a high level throughout the semifinals and potentially the finals of the college football playoff. He's a guy that I absolutely love his frame. They've got him listed at 6'4", 235. He's a big guy, but he's athletic at that size. We saw him run the football a lot more at Kansas State. And the thing that really impresses me about Howard is his throwing motion, his arm talent, all of that looks NFL worthy. But his completion percentage at Kansas State was under 60%. That's always a red flag for me. I'm a firm believer. I can't remember who said it first. I heard it 3 or 4 years ago for the first time. That completion percentage is a skill. It's reflective of a skill. And if you struggle to complete a high number of passes in college, the likelihood that you're going to ascend to the pro level and step up in talent and improve accuracy is unrealistic. We've seen it a number of times. The most recent example is Anthony Richardson. He was a sub 60% completion percentage guy at Florida, but everyone fell in love with the traits, including for a time me. The athletic ability, the arm strength, all of that. Best athlete at the quarterback position ever at the combine. But he's 50% in his 2 years with the Colts. He's too erratic. He misses wide open guys, throws them at his feet, throws it over his head. It's a mechanical thing. And then I think because of the shoulder injury, maybe I saw his mechanics change this year, and I think they're worse. I think he's regressing. So if a guy completes 55, 56% of his passes like Howard did at Kansas State, he's not a guy that's going to be high on my board. But this year at Ohio State, 72% completions. Playing in the Big Ten, playing in big games every week, and now playing in the college football playoff. It reminds me a bit of Jaden Daniels' ascension, where when I saw him his first 2 years at Arizona State, and then he transferred to LSU, I remember thinking, LSU wants him? He didn't seem like a passer to me at Arizona State at all. But then you saw what they were able to accomplish at LSU under Kelly, and the leap he took, second pick in the draft, maybe rookie of the year. Here we go. I think Howard's a guy that's ascending. He seems like a guy that players gravitate to, big time leader, and that big physical presence. And who knows? Maybe Chip Kelly, who interviewed for the Seahawks offensive coordinator position last year, maybe they get a Chip Kelly, Will Howard package. But that's who I'm going with here in the second round. Now we look at what's left available in the third, and we've addressed a weapon on offense. We've taken a quarterback, but we haven't addressed either trench. And so as I sit here in the third round, that's what I'm looking for, right? And here's a guy right at the top of their board that's incredibly intriguing. Deion Walker out of Kentucky. Look at the dimensions on this guy. 6'6", 345. He's going to the Senior Bowl. Can't wait to see him. Jim Nagy loves him. He's a little bit of an anomaly in that he's kind of high cut. He has a little bit of a skinnier lower body, and he's just jacked up top. And so there's some concern about his base. Let's see what the guys at Draft Buzz say about him. They have really taken, if you haven't checked them out, do. They've sort of taken the place for me of the Draft Network, who completely has fallen apart, in my opinion, after, all those studs that built that place have left. Joe Marino, Kyle Krabs, all those guys. But let's take a look at their defensive line rankings and see what they say about Deion Walker. They have him, sorry, a little slow internet at the moment. Okay, not finding him. Hang on. Okay. So here's a little bit they say in their detailed scouting report. Massive size and length makes him a formidable presence on the defensive line. Exceptional power allows him to offensive linemen, often requiring double teams to contain him. Fuck. Positional versatility, comfortable playing across the defensive line, even dropping into coverage when needed. That sounds like a Mike McDonald defensive lineman. High motor, work ethic, consistently playing with intensity and determination on every snap. Weaknesses, tends to play too tall out of his stance, making it easier for offensive linemen to gain leverage. You see that a lot with guys that are that sort of frame. While versatile, needs to prove he can handle a full NFL workload. That's pretty typical of defensive linemen coming out of college. Let's read a little bit of their summary. Deion Walker brings an impressive blend of size, power, and agility to the table, making him a standout defensive line prospect. His ability to disrupt both the run and pass game, combined with his high motor and versatility, positions him as a valuable asset for any NFL defense. We're taking Deion Walker here, right? Doesn't that sound like exactly the kind of guy that you'd want to add to that defensive line? It really would take some pressure off of Byron Murphy. In fact, I think unless there's any character concerns or medical issues, hard to imagine that Deion Walker is going to be available at that point in the draft. Here's what we ended up with. And again, we took some guys. You can ignore the PFF draft grades when you use this simulator because they grade based on how closely you took a guy to their rankings. And they had Will Howard like 92nd. We took him 50th. They had Walker a little lower, although he was the third overall guy on their boards. They gave him a B+. That was interesting. But Warren, again, they had him at 26. We took him at 18, so they give us a D+. But tight end Tyler Warren, quarterback Will Howard, defensive lineman Deion Walker. So there's that one. Okay, so we'll call that one 2, and we'll call this one 1, just to show you that again. This is what I came up with ahead of time. Tyler Booker, left guard Alabama. Jackson Dart, quarterback Ole Miss. Omar Norman Lott, defensive tackle Tennessee. Before you cast your vote, down in the comments here on YouTube, I want you to think about something. Keep in mind that the roster on April, whenever the draft is, 26th, 27th, 28th, the end of April, is going to be different than it is today. And so if you look at the second one and go, you didn't take an offensive lineman, what an idiot are you? Remember what I said earlier, that they could acquire offensive linemen between now and then. And I would consider it a failure of an offseason if they didn't acquire somebody that could be of starting caliber before the draft. And also at the end of the day, this idea that you absolutely need and want, whenever you can, to take the best player available, the player that has the best chance of being an all-pro. Tyler Warren has a chance to be one of the best tight ends in the NFL and a dynamic offensive weapon. The quarterback, no one should argue with me about taking a shot on a quarterback, especially when your starter's 35 years old. Like, let's start taking shots. And this draft does encourage me more so than last year's. We knew we weren't going to get a shot at the top 6 last year, but after that, the drop-off was a cliff. Literally, Spencer Rattler was the next quarterback taken. He didn't go till the 5th round, and I didn't like him. Not as a potential starter anyway. But this year, there are guys that I can see developing into really good young quarterbacks that you can win with. And they're layered a little bit more throughout the draft. So while last year there wasn't a single day 2 quarterback, this year I think there could be 4 or 5. And then you take a guy like Walker who addresses a massive need on the defensive line, and you do it at a 3rd round rookie contract as opposed to going out in free agency and having to pay defensive linemen, good starting defensive linemen salaries in free agency. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. And also keep this in mind. You turn back around to the 4th round, you go into day 3, and that's where, man, a lot of interior offensive linemen live there. Like, I wish they've wrapped up this draft now, but I wish I could go back in to see who they still had available after the 3rd round, because there would likely be some names there of guys that could be good for you right away. So keep all those things in mind, and before you cast your final vote. A couple of reminders. Again, get over to The Pick Is In, at The Pick Is In Pod on Twitter, at The Pick Is In Pod on YouTube, and subscribe there. We'll have our debut show on Saturday. Bryce Coots and I from the Hawkzone Rundown podcast. We're going to do our full first round league-wide draft. That channel is going to focus more on the entire league. So get into it, would you? Also hit that subscribe button here on the YouTube channel. It's the best way to support the channel. Subscribe, share it, hit that bell for notification of future episodes. If you listen on audio, if you'd leave a rating or a review, that helps out the channel, certainly. And then definitely subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Yeah, that's going to do it for me. I'm Dan, at Seahawks Forever on Twitter and Blue Sky. And also coming up on Friday, Corbin Smith of All Seahawks and Locked On Seahawks will be joining me to kind of give his insight. Another year covering the Seahawks as a beat reporter for him. He to this point has had the best insight. Wrote a story you should check out. That's some sourced material with some anonymous quotes from inside the Seahawks offices about how the whole Ryan Grubb, Mike McDonald thing went down. Really, really cool insight there. Definitely want to check that out. Corbin will be checking in with me on Friday. Until next time, forever and always go Hawks. Thanks for watching, you guys. We'll see you soon.